put in, we'll be able to put the minutes in from this empathy training lit review team into this page, and or into each page. Each meeting can have its own page, so we can have documents and minutes. There's a heading for methods, empathy building methods. So, you know, empathy circles, empathy maps, focusing, interviewing, listening, meditation, mediation, mindfulness. And we can just keep breaking down the different empathy building methods, and so that each one has its own page. And then started putting together papers. So these are various, you know, each paper we can have a link, you know, add it here, as well as I used the headings that you had, Melissa, for your form. So it can go into the form as well as go into its own web page. And then if there's methods, I was kind of playing around with that. If there's like role play, that could hyperlink to the methods page, and also could hyperlink to the measurements, like what measurements did they use. And I've already put in a bunch there, and just to kind of get the ball rolling, just a page here just for sort. I was looking for like where are places to research. You know, where can we do research for articles? I know there's a lot of government databases and so forth. And then this heading here is for studies. The other one was papers, so it's more academic papers. And this one is actual studies that were done. And for example, this one here is a meta-analysis. There's already some meta-analysis of empathy training programs, and this one by Robert Paul Butler's. You know, he already did one in 2010. I think he studied like 25 different training methods, 24 different studies. He did a meta-analysis. And then we've got a to-do list. And these are some academic centers I was starting to put there of people to contact, like Karen Gerdes. She's at Arizona State University, I think it is, and she's in the social work department, and they've done a lot of study there on empathy and social work. Mohammad Drez Hojat has done a lot of work on empathy and in the healthcare, and he has a book on it, and he's just like a prolific researcher. And I've talked to him before, and he actually did mention, he said, Edwin, you should put on a conference on empathy, and you're the person to put this on. And so that's actually what Yanti is talking about, is, you know, can we put together that this group can actually lead towards, you know, networking and eventually lead to a conference on training empathy. So, and so these are just a few other, or you know, people who are working on empathy, and we can just keep. And I've sent a couple of them email, but to you know, connect with them. So that's a little bit of an overview of that. Do you want to give a Melissa, introduction to your input form?
Well, I was just, you know, kind of looking at it from a perspective of what, you know, trying to create kind of an APA-like form with just the basic information that you would need to be able to find the article if you wanted to read it in depth. Of course, not everyone can access the article without going behind a paywall. I understand that, but at least it'll get you where you need to go. For me, you know, having a little bit about this, I was looking at this more for our sake, but anyone else who was looking into empathy training methods, giving just a little bit of information about the study and what the effects were. So a longer kind of abstract than you might find before the paywall, without pasting the whole article there, of course. I mean, that wouldn't be very ethical, would it? But it was also meant, you know, not only knowing that maybe some of interesting studies are done that aren't actually published academically. an author or an organization who does it, just as Edwin was mentioning. Maybe they're using different kinds of methods that a validated instrument that we have listed. So to leave some room for, kind of very general and broad questions to try and gather as much information about, how people are assessing in their studies. I also was really interested to know kind of the field that it was done in, what sector the study was done in, because there are certain different kinds of approaches based on the different field that they're working in, and also what the result was, hoping that there might be some non-positive result studies out there. So we'd like to see what doesn't work, would be really nice, and anything else that might be relevant that you come across. I mean, I would imagine that right now this is going to be used by kind of a smaller group, but maybe when the word gets out, this will be a far more diverse resource. Obviously, one of the nice things about using a Google Doc is that it turns into an Excel spreadsheet. So for those of you later who want a full resource without having to click through and look for keywords or different search terms, that's something that can easily be shared with everyone to look in. But and also putting it on Google means you could also enter it like a spreadsheet if you take any offense to entering it this way. So I'm just trying to be flexible but complete. None of the fields are required. So if there isn't information or there's not as much, except for the result, I think I had that one I did require because I wanted to know specifically what happened. Anyway, that can be taken off as required, whatever people need. But that's kind of where we were. I have to give most of the credit to, actually pretty much all 99% of the credit to Edwin for getting it this far. So please don't look at me for the kudos. You should clap for him.
Well, thanks. I clap for both, okay?
Well, I would add one thing too, is that the Google, I don't know who's used Google Sites before. Does anybody used it? Okay, it's oh great, because it's pretty easy to use, because you can create I thought I'd just give a quick tour, and because everybody here can have permissions to it, and you'll be able to go in and access it, and you can just click on here to create a page. And you just, title the page, Rush 2016. You go under and choose where you want it to be posted. You just click and you just say create. And it creates the page. You can go and start editing. And then you just say save. And it goes in, and there you are. It's already there. So if you're doing, going out and researching articles, you can, bring the article back, put it into Melissa's form, or create a page for it, and then it's pretty easy to hyperlink. You can go in if you want to edit a page, just click edit a page. You highlight it. You go under links. And then you can say, well, this method was empathy circles, and then click, and then that'll link you back to the empathy circles as a method. So, and then you just click save, and that's it. So that's pretty much that. So yeah, so I'm pretty done, complete with showing the site.
Are there any questions about that so far? Are we missing something? Do you see any glaring omissions or things you'd like to see?
Well, I would have one question. If I have an existing spreadsheet already, or to put it another way, I'm using an academic database, Chitabi from Switzerland. Now, I could easily transfer my the literature I have gathered so far into a spreadsheet. Can I import that into the website, the relevant papers I found?
I think the best thing to do would be to send it to me, and then I can match up the columns in the spreadsheet that we have in the Google site. So that's fine. I don't mind doing that at all. I mean, I thought maybe everybody would have Mendeley or EndNote or whatever. So I knew that there was a lot of resources out there for people to gather this. So if you can turn your resources into some kind of spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet or Excel spreadsheet, I don't mind doing the work of columning things properly so we're all looking in the same area. And then that can easily get transferred back into the site visibly for Edwin. Not for Edwin, for us all, but, you know, in that method. Would you be happy to do that? I mean, I'd be happy to take that work off your... I don't want you to have to do it.
Well, I mean, I don't want you to do it either. But
either way, I can give you access to the. I can give you access. Everybody also at back-end access to the Excel spreadsheet or the Google spreadsheet, and you can enter it yourself. I mean, please feel free.
Well, okay. I think I can give it a try, and if it doesn't prove to be too difficult, then I do it myself. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to take you up on your offer and send you. I mean, I haven't gathered so much because I'm still at a very early stage of my PhD research, but it's a few papers, and sure.
How many do you think you have that relate to training?
Well, let's have a look.
Yeah, it is important that we stick to the articles that are really about training. So general things about what is empathy, or that's less appropriate for this particular gathering of articles. So things about training would be the most important.
Well, that's about 20, I'd say. But I have to go through that list and weed out the ones which aren't maybe that important, and also I'm sure we don't want to have any doubles.
Well, we'll sort for doubles. That's no problem. Rosa, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I have a question. So I appreciate seeing the clarity of the focus, that this is on training in empathy, and I guess I'm just wanting a little bit more clarification even on how you mean that. So I get that this is not articles on what is empathy, but when you say training in empathy, what are you meaning by empathy? So is it training in using certain kinds of practices, or is it training in having a general orientation, or?
From my perspective, I'm interested in how in studies and articles that show how we can increase people's empathy. And that's about as broad as I can say it, I think. I mean, so when I talk about training methods, I think, you know, what kind of, if you've done something, if you've measured a group before, and then you've done something, and you measure them after, and you see a change or not in their level of empathy, that's, for me, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, this is me. Maybe we want to look broader than this. But I'm looking for the articles and studies that do something to a person or a group of people or some kind of population, and there's a change or not because of what they do. And it's about the change in their empathy. Or perspective taking, or social media. I mean, I know that there's more out there than that.
So if I can just, go ahead. Well,
no,
I just want to follow up a little bit, because it's like, I'm just kind of trying to pin down what this empathy thing is, because in my experience with working with people can be very nice and kind and empathetic and perspective taking, except when they're triggered, right? In which case something else comes out. So are we talking about some kind of baseline personality measurement? Are we talking about people's ability to deal with to use empathy in particularly challenging situations, which to me those seem like they're different things, possibly.
I mean, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I think for me, I mean, I think the empathy is defined differently by a lot of different people differently, and I also think that it depends on the context. I mean, there are some who talk about, they talk about it in different contexts too. I don't think we want to be so incredibly narrow that we only want one thing, but I think that the basis criteria that I would look for is there's a group that gets, or a group that they measure them at the beginning, or they see something occurring at the beginning and they do something, they do some kind of intervention or test or method, or teach them something, and they hope for a change. Whether that change occurs or not is, either way, I'm interested in both. But it is about that affecting change somehow.
Okay.
And I think, go ahead.
Yeah. And also maybe empathy not only as perceiving but also as acting. I mean, you probably read the paper of Tanya Singer, and she makes this distinction between empathy and compassion, which we here in Berlin do not make. We think it's all empathy, whether you act or you just perceive. But so is it more also that when we talk of empathy, we mean empathetic behaving? Also in that direction, or
my sense is that's what we're kind of talking about here. This is the group that we're forming, and that's part of the conversation. Is to write down all these issues and then have discussions about them to really start, being clear on what it is that we're talking about.
And I guess what I'm hearing so far is that the answer is that it's inclusive. It's all of it. Yes.
Edwin and I were talking also the other day about this. Is very interesting because the literature review not also we can measure how the different approaches or techniques can change the empathy level, but how the specific tool can work in different settings. So the same, perhaps a training or a tool created for mediation in politics would seem like outrageous to apply in other settings, but we can see how the tools work and adapt those tools for problems in families, for example. So perhaps we could, I don't know, like list the tools, and after we can review them, distribute them in how they will work or what context they will work better, which ones are kind of difficult to use in different contexts, which are very versatile, and we can adapt to different contexts. That could be another way to deal with the research. It's what I do, for example, with the arts. I go through many fields, and I adapt the findings or the structures of the trainings into multidisciplinary fields, into other kinds of trainings, and then use it independently for different contexts or age groups. But the skeleton, it's the same.
I echo that point. I was thinking that right now we have like 220 papers. It's still manageable. But when we have more papers, I mean, for us who know this literature, it's fairly easy to just go through them and pick them out. But for people who don't know, they have to kind of go through every of them to figure out what study this is about. So I'm thinking maybe we could sort them, like have sub-pages or some tabs, something, to clarify the context they're used. Like some papers are on autistic children or adults. They are clearly different from conflict resolution, and clearly different from like business leaders, and very different from, let's say, prisoners. So I guess we can define a few broad categories and then put specific papers or studies, although I don't know what's the difference between studies and papers so far. I hope someone can explain that. But can put them into categories, and then it might be easier for people to just sort through them. And also yes.
Sure, I had that question myself too, and also because you see things like Baron Cohen's work, and there are certain things in certain contexts. So in the form that I made, and you'll see this in the spreadsheet as well, I've specifically defined like what field is this for, and also what kind of participants were they looking at. So who were the study? Who did they do this with? So who ran this? Was this business people? Was this art students? Was this autistic children, like you mentioned? So who was being tested? And that also, is interesting for you, Mercedes, because you can say, okay, this was obviously done on autistic children, so, taking some lessons from there, maybe I could apply this, here. I can understand your application might be different, but it is good to have the clarity of what was the situation that the study was about, because, there might also be very specific things in there that you shouldn't ignore.
So when I look at the list on the left, on the measurement part, because the measurement is basically DV, and personal trait, as Rosa said, it's one kind of way to measure empathy, and there are ways to measure empathy as situational, like motivational empathy, depending on context. So I think one problem I see with that is this is only a list about the stable personal traits, and in research there has been many ways to measure, like kind of using fMRI or using behavioral measures or attitude prejudice reduction, all kinds of things to measure empathy, and those are also very helpful ways to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention. So as a toolbox, I think, because to provide tools, basically we provide IVs, independent variables, which is intervention themselves, and we provide measurement, which is a DV, dependent variables, and then people can use creatively combine them and apply them to different audiences. So I think as the DV, the tool of measurement, we could largely expand that. What are the ways people measure empathy? Which
Wonderful.
Because I taught empathy, and I have spent one class on measuring empathy, and I do have some list of different ways to measure it in the lab or in the field, or as personal traits or as other pro-social behavior and stuff.
Can you help us build that out some more? Because then that's a wonderful, if we build that into the form more, not just one box that says other, but build more methods into this form. We can easily click on the one, so we can still have some kind of, general measurement tools. There are specific ones, obviously, but more general approaches to measuring, and that will give a much broader overview. That's wonderful.
Right. And also, actually, someone else has done that work. So I can send this to you, too.
One thing is this site is just a prototype to get the ball rolling, so you have something in hand. The whole site is editable, so you can go in and add pages like under measurements, add any measurements, and I think it's just to get the ball rolling to start the discussion. It's not the whole thing is open for redesign, and even using a whole different platform if we find another platform that's more effective.
There is, I don't know if you know the ProQuest tool Flow. Is everybody familiar with that tool? Okay, so RefWorks. Does that sound familiar? Okay, so it's a citation manager from ProQuest. It's a large database. I just sent you an email with 2 reference lists of what I found. I'm not sure it's totally coherent, but you can look at. I have most of those articles, so I can share with you the articles themselves if you cannot get them, if it's not a book. But Flow, if you go to Flow from ProQuest, it's a very easy tool what it does, and we can share it. So I'm not sure if you want to move to that platform, but it actually links to the actual article, and it goes on each website and take all the information for the citation that is needed automatically. And you can add your own kind of like
Notes?
things, yeah, notes in it, and then share it with other people. So I could share like what I shared now just as a reference list in APA style. I have much more information in the actual folder, and then if I share with you, you can have all that information there, which include the abstracts and sometimes the actual article in it. So I don't know. It depends if everybody's like interested in this kind of like.
Can you share the screen? Can we look at the interface? See
Or put a link on the group chat.
Yeah, give me a second to get there.
One other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm open with everything too. I also want to make sure that we don't close the collection to non-academic studies. I mean, there's obviously things out there that are happening from the non-academic world, and I think we should still, try and collect those in some way too.
And that was my question, Lisa, because I was thinking, if we are going to build a training program, is this training program for people out there or just for academics? Because sometimes the academic world doesn't connect with what is happening, in real life. So how we're going to somehow produce a way in which we can translate all this information that perhaps it's very easy for us to handle because we are used to go with citations and reading its scholarly papers. How are we going to translate their information for people who, teachers, facilitators, how are we going to bridge the scholarly literature review with the actual training program?
That's what Rosa's, as I understand, what your whole thesis is on, right? That's what your PhD is on, how to bridge those two.
Well,
yeah. And actually, I mean, if we have the training program, I mean, it's for the academic to know how it functions and why it's functions, and that it's valid and everything else. But the program itself can be very simple and very easy to understand. I mean, I know a lot of empathy programs or tools that are really quite easy to understand, and so I mean, the things that are easy to understand are sometimes very hard to prove from an academic point, but that doesn't really mean that, that they are not simple to use, right?
yeah.
So we can have both the academic proof, which I think is very important for the analytical, business-oriented, strategic thinking kind of mindset, and the very easy to grasp front end, so to speak.
So I have a question and a concern about all this. I'm actually very interested in this thing of bridging the academic and the practical, but that isn't exactly the topic of my dissertation yet. It seems to me that this particular project is very useful, okay, just in itself, regardless. And if we're wanting to do that bridge, I'm wondering if maybe there's some kind of effort, like starting from both ends. Like this project is starting from the academic world, and I'm wondering if there could be a project that would look at what are the practices that are out there and what is the research that is needed to support and validate those practices more. Because otherwise, we're not necessarily going to get over here by just starting on this end of it, if that makes sense.
Rosa, I totally agree with you, and that's why I'm proposing a new course at Brown to undergrads, which is called Empathy, Theories, and Applications. So basically, they have to design a research to validate or just evaluate some intervention, and they need to design creative solutions or intervention to solve a problem. So that I totally agree with you.
Yeah, me too, Rosa. Actually, I'm sending a research proposal to several universities to try to, look for the academic proof of all the statements, of all the resources people are using. Or I think they are working out there, but they don't have an academic support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I also think that that keeping trying to focus this on not talking about truth, because that'd be the last thing a researcher would want to talk about, but talking about finding evidence of things that that have been done and tested in a formal way is really important, because I think that can be useful to any practitioner.
Yes.
But I think it is really important that I also have seen a lot of things out there that profess to train things that don't train them really, but that are lovely for book sales. So I would like to kind of stay away from that as much as we can, right? In this context, and really try and focus on the things that are that do have a basis in science.
Here's the question, though. The things that have a basis in science are wonderful, and there's a lot of things out there that have a lot of experiential evidence, anecdotal evidence, etc., and that have not had the opportunity to be tested by science. So how can we provide support so that these things can become part of, and yeah, it's like there's a program out there and maybe the testing will show X or maybe it will show Y. Great. But there's a lot of programs that would love to be tested, and that most of the programs that get tested, from my sociological look at it, are the programs that are started by people who have connections with an academic institution already. So it's not like there is some arbiter of fairness there who says, oh, let's look and see if this program is more worthy of getting tested than this program. It's a sheer privilege issue. It's like an arbitrary chance whether one program happens to have all the academic support to do the research, to make it evidence-based, and another program has never been able to acquire that.
But I think that's a great discussion, and I think having case studies, of here's a program that has approached it this way and shows this result. I'm really interested in that too, whether or not they use a validated method for testing. But there's one. Go ahead, Chuan.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Why not you finish first?
That's okay.
Okay, so because I love what Rosa said. I think there's already a business model there. Like many programs, they have product, service, like things to provide to their customers. Like the other day I was contacted by the Empathy Toy. They have Empathy Toy. I mean, they have news outlet, but they don't have academic evaluation on how effective their toys actually are building people's empathy. So, and there are many programs like that, some social enterprise or non-profits or for-profits. I mean, so if I'm maybe thinking too crazily, but if we can have some kind of standard like SOP, and then any clients who wants to evaluate the effectiveness of their service can just go through the standards, the procedures, and that would be cool. I mean, some people might want to have their projects validated by science.
And there might be, but I also think there's so many things that can happen. I mean, having a conference, which I really want to do too, Yanti. But there's so many things, and I think to get it started by collecting the evidence that we can find, the things that we have, and building on that with programs that have established that may not be validated scientifically, but still show, in their own way, have been able to explain, to gather that data too, and to maybe even just by having a resource, if I'm thinking out loud, just by having a resource of studies there where a company or anyone, a trainer, could say, gosh, I'd work with listening skills and creating empathy, but yeah, I'm not really quite sure if what I've done is, is right. I think that our students are developing their skills. Hey, look, there are others who are applying this too, and then with the information there, they can easily make contact with people who are working in that field too. So I look at it as an open database, an open shared resource for people who are interested in either bringing their own methods further, looking at. I mean, I think it could be used for a lot of things, but I just like to get started and building it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I would think that if you could broaden also the target of this gathering, for example, a lot of people still have to be convinced that increasing the empathy level in any given organization is actually good for the organization. Of course, in this kind of circle, everybody would agree that the more empathy, the better. But when I talk, for example, to business clients, and they, well, it would be nice to gather as much empirical information about the usefulness of increasing actually the empathy level in any given organization. Studies in that direction would also be very useful, because you have the people who say, well, if everybody is very empathetic, who's doing the work? That's here in Germany. That's kind of an issue. That's the kind of fear that people voice when you try to sell them empathy trainings.
I hear you, Sasha. Actually, that's what my PhD is about. Very crudely termed, the effect of heightened empathy on your bottom line, on your professional performance.
Yeah.
We can talk about that another time. I don't have a study about that published yet. But I did.
Yes, please.
But my first study that's coming out in the springtime does show that businesses, professionals in my field, in the communications field, rate the empathic ability as the top 3 indicator of an excellent performing professional in their field.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, they do.
I have to define that a little bit
but
more, but they say it's really important. But I want to see how it affects their bottom line.
Yeah, that's because I think that's a very interesting question, because I've read studies like that everybody thinks, oh, empathy is so important, but then do they invest money in empathy trainings? Have anybody actually studied the effect on, let's say, a business organization? How does it improve, community thinking and overall, and then again we come to the point, empathy is maybe not only there to increase the profit of some shareholder, but then it really becomes a little difficult how to actually measure the effectiveness of empathy. But it's a very interesting topic, and I think a lot of research has to be done to provide some hard data.
Well, you can also look at it at customer satisfaction indexes, So there's a lot of ways, a lot of angles that you can go in that isn't really about financial bottom line, but business results in general.
Right.
Anyway, Rosa.
Yeah. So I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I get that we need to start somewhere. I'm wondering whether what we're doing here could be modular, like we could just copy some of the templates and then start a template on a place to, as we're looking at this research, if we come across on something on the usefulness of increasing empathy in an organization, we would have a place to put that, right? So I think that would be really useful. And to that end, I wanted to make a comment around, Edwin has been very inspirational to me in this sense of having this empathy hashtag so that we can all find each other. I do want to say that there is a lot of work in the business world for several decades now, yet they were calling it interpersonal skills or interpersonal understanding or things like that. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that in our work we could include things that don't explicitly use the label empathy, but that we know that it's a connected thing. And so if one of the little boxes or categories could be for articles that aren't talking about empathy per se, but what is the equivalent that they're using that we think has a connection with empathy?
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with that too, and I think what you say is really interesting. If we could, kind of have a template for practice. I tried to put the template for practice-based and evidence-based kind of in the same thing to be inclusive. But if we want to approach this from kind of two different directions and gather data a little bit differently, that's perfectly okay. And I think also, with empathy being, being part of or described as so many different things, to be a little bit flexible on, on that is okay, or at least to indicate that this wasn't specifically about empathy. But I'd like to really focus on getting the studies that really are describing empathy and really focusing on that too. But I don't think we should ignore other ones. What do you guys think about that?
Right. There are a lot of studies out there who don't label themselves as empathy but are related to empathy. So we could include that, I guess, by categorizing studies into context. Then, I mean, in some contexts they don't really call that empathy, like in organizational training stuff, or in conflict resolution. They don't. Maybe they call it something else, but then we have a better sense. At least we have a structure to look through them and organize.
I think I named that the constructs of focus. So which aspects we're really being focused on. It's a very open box too. So to open that, but the whole thing can be modified if you think, oh no, it's totally different, totally open to that, no problem. Have we left you all speechless already? I'm just really grateful that you're all here. Thank you so much. I mean, this is just wonderful to see a shared enthusiasm.
I'm kind of concerned about I see two very different lines, and I'm kind of concerned how we are going to make them fit.
Merge. Yeah.
Because when we discuss as academics, and we are in academic settings, it's enriching, it's fantastic, and we all understand ourselves, and we love to feel and go for more and more, and we could spend days and days filling a database. But when we are down there, we need to reach people. If what Edwin is trying to build is a movement of a movement about empathy, I still think that we need to find ways to be empathic ourselves, in the sense that it's not only what comes from the academia, but what comes from the bottom. How can we connect those worlds? Because I think that if we can also prove that all the things that are being done outside the academic world in relation with empathy are itself proves that people somehow feels the need to create tools and to work on these issues. In education, there's a bunch of teachers creating things because they need it in the classroom, because they have to deal with bullying, with with many issues. So perhaps we can not divide, but come from the two sides. Provide some kind of awareness about what is being done, that it's talking about the need of empathy, and it's working outside the academic world. So also the academic world can focus in what people is asking. Not all the information coming from the academic world as this is the way you should see it, because this is the way that science sees, and this is the way that the proof and the measurement sees, because that's not the way the people who is not in the academic world lives empathy. So I am concerned about how do we really make not only what is happening visible, but even our work as academics to get out of the universities and reach people. No, the hours we spend investigating and researching normally it stays in the universities. It's very funny that an empathy curriculum wouldn't address, that need for us as academics to reach the people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Thanks.
I'll go after.
I think Mercedes has an excellent point because I just came back from our annual meeting, the personality and social psychology, which is the meeting for the field of social psychology. I know a bunch of them, most of the research are from social psychology and empathy, of course. So we were just talking about that, and some very important speakers are all addressing this issue in different ways. So one is like Jamil Zaki. He has, I think he set a good example. He launched a website called something called People Science, something like that, and to write up their studies.
I lost the phone.
How to read that. Also have a center.
You're breaking up a little bit, Xuan.
Yeah, this one.
Okay. So I just gave example on Jamil Zaki's People Science as a way to outreach. And there are also other researchers who are aware of this issue. Like at Stanford, they have the center or the Spark. I can't remember what's the names, but they are trying to solve the last mile problem of social science, which is researchers do a fantastic job, but they don't deliver to the people who they should deliver, like practitioners, policymakers, educators. So yeah, I think that's a good concern, but since we are all aware of this issue, so hopefully we can address it.
And I don't think that collecting the literature here actually collides in any way with the mission of bringing empathy to the people. I think that is two very distinct things. And I think collecting literature will help all of us who are in the process of studying empathy to have a resource, and it will also create a body of proof that empathy is a very real thing and very useful, and that is separate from actually going out and using it. And I think Edwin has planned a lot of other wonderful things how to actually do that, bring empathy to the people, right, Edwin?
Yes, I was going to mention that this is the kind of coming at the empathy curriculum from the academic aspect, doing a literature review, just having that narrow focus of a literature review. There's the what that Xuan and I started was the Empathy Trainers Salon, so that's a space for trainers to present their work, as well as something that's kind of growing there is maybe the trainers can present a prototype or a lesson and then have a review of it, so you can come at it from both ends. And this part is really about putting together a platform for the studies and the papers and kind of organizing those in a systematic way, and then also cross-referencing them so we can have the study cross-referenced with the population, cross-referenced with the methods and any other fields that we want. So wouldn't want to do too much with this group, but maybe have different groups for different, coming at it from different angles.
Another question. So I think someone mentioned outreaching just now. I just wonder if Edwin or anyone is connected to Ashoka. So Ashoka seems like they have a dedicated project on empathy, but personally I don't know anyone over there, but I just wonder if they have some good resources.
I was going to reach out to them. I've reached out before, had interviewed the people, but they use a lot of volunteers, and the people come and go. It's like, you know, people, and it's like, you know, 6 months later, most of them are gone. So I've been gathering some emails, and I thought once the ball was rolling here, I would actually connect with them and see if they wanted to somehow be involved in what we're doing.
I tried to also contact them through the Changemakers campus program, which is about empathy on campus, but it's also about change in general, so leading social change, so not specifically only on empathy, but it's a big investment for my university, and they're not really on board yet. So we're working towards that, and also like Mary Gordon's work in Canada. I know that she's having another conference in April. I wonder if anybody's going. The Roots of Empathy. I know that it's more focused on adolescents, but I wondered.
Sorry, I've heard about their project. Can you say more about the conference, or can you give a link?
There's Mary Gordon. She wrote a book called Roots of Empathy, and that's the name of a program too, Roots of Empathy. And they have a big research conference coming up in April, May. It's on Edwin's site, actually, under conferences, of course, scoop man as he is. And I plan on going to the one in London, most likely if I can get husbandal permission, about social justice and empathy and conflict resolution.
In the Middle East, and that link is on my site as well. I just put the link into the conference section, so you can go in there and see. Those are all the conferences that I'm aware of, and if you have any others, let me know. I'll add them. So that should be a pretty comprehensive list.
I have the same experience you had, Edwin. I contacted them. They contacted me for models of education in empathy and soul making, and I sent out a project, but the people keep changing. And I never heard back. I even sent some ideas and possible trainings or lessons, but then the people are no longer there. So.
Well, this just shows how wonderful it is to start connecting everybody in a little better way. Yanti?
I need to go to teach, so I'm sorry I'm leaving you. I'll see the end of the recording, and also I'll see you in 2 weeks. And I think we have the list and the website, so we'll know how to communicate and find ways with each one of you.
Fantastic, and I really am looking forward to talking more about building this conference too. So,
sure.
So have an inspiring teaching day. Go.
Thank you.
Go inspire.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Yanti.
So, in a big vision, we are moving towards this conference, and we are kind of building the biggest library in empathy.
Yeah, hopefully a comprehensive resource and a platform for studies and articles, papers on training empathy that can also be built on. So all the grad students who are working on this theme, there's going to be all there for them, instead of, it seems like every time I turn around that they've like recreating these lists, and then they all get stuck away in some kind of a drawer that nobody ever sees, and so
So what about also, I've been thinking about this, I don't know if it's crazy, but there are some articles, some papers, dissertations, they are so good, and the only people who read them is us. How about creating something in which we can translate at least the best ideas, and find it, and some of those papers, at least, and with permission, your papers of other colleagues and friends, and make it available for people. In a language that it's easier for them to read, and if they are interested in in going deeper or enroll in the university and do research, academic research, great. But somehow we put all this effort of amazing scholars working, and we make it reach down to population.
Kind of like what I learned this week. Kind of,
When people, you have a bunch of bestsellers in anything that is not proven, but people read them, and the one who doesn't read them, read the summary, because you have so many ways to reach to every book. There is many people are doing, and very interesting, I have to say, some of them I enjoy greatly. They are doing like postcards about great literature, great books in self-help, great books in everything. But what the universities and the academic world do, the academic does, is not there. So what about if creating one of the tools could be, for example, what we are working on, what Xuan is working. Perhaps she produces an immense, you spend 3 years producing a thesis that only your advisors read, or the people who are working in empathy. Perhaps we can create something about to translate those findings, and that could be part of what the Center of Empathy does. It translates the information academic world produce into a language that anybody can understand and read. So the academic research becomes also bestseller.
That's true, and that's what what I mentioned about people's science. Samuel Zeki is already doing this. I'm saying that, not saying that we shouldn't do this. I'm just saying before we are able to dedicate resources on this, we could use their outlet, which is beautifully designed and has a collection of very high quality research. And researchers, scholars, they write their own piece, unmitigated, not translated by some journalist who don't understand exactly. They write the piece, but the audience. So I think that could be a very helpful tool.
Perhaps having our literature review, our academic side, and then our academic side, but in a way that it's reachable for whoever wants to read. So if they want to read you, Melissa, but it's just, somebody who I won't understand what Melissa says without the bones of citations and all that, but they can actually understand what you did, what you were trying to convey, and how important is it.
I know in the Netherlands, when I applied for my grant, we had to put a layman's version, a 1-paragraph layman's description of the research that we were going to conduct, and that was actually probably the hardest part, to make it not sound condescending and too minimal, but it's a requirement now for all of our papers that when we write them, because we get government grants to do our research, that we write a 1-page layman's version. So I think it's kind of nice, and I think it is trending now more, as far as I'm witnessing myself in my perspective.
As you can see, my big concern, I will have to research about it, is how to reach the people, how to bring academia research to the people. So we could really make it valuable to the people and open, funds to keep researching. Because part of the problem of not having funds to research is that they really don't reach what they need to reach. So just to keep it in mind, perhaps in part of doing our research and filling up those charts, we can also, perhaps in the papers you open and the links you open, Edwin, about our unnamed portfolios, we can start putting some ideas of how that information could be communicated to all people of all walks in life. And we will be the first to produce some kind of literature, that it's scientifically based, very well researched, very serious, but accessible to people.
To make it really accessible for the average person, so that anyone can use the material. Rosa, you had your hand up?
Yeah. So I think this has been a great conversation. I thank you so much, Xuan, for the link on the people's science. And I'm delighted to hear about what's happening in Belgium in terms of that requirement of having it in people's language. That's really inspiring to me. So it's really clear to me that this science-based research thing will be really, really helpful by what you said, Edwin, in terms of allowing people to not have to reinvent the wheel. I'm still feeling like there is a thing that I'm interested in, which is a little different from what has been said here, which is that although I think that you touched on it, Shuan, a little bit. And so it may not be this project, but I think it's more than the practitioners' roundtables that we've been doing. Like, I would like to see a map of different practices that also specifically says, interviewing practitioners what kind of research they think would best support their practices, that would then be something that would be communicated to grad students looking for possible things to do. So if the grad students had both of those things, if they had the thing that this group is doing, which is the reviews of the, what's out there so far, and they also had a sense of where there is good work that really would like some help to be able to become more evidence-based, then they would be able to put those two things together, and it would really help the field advance.
But you don't think that
I just wanted to get an understanding of, are you saying that there's like a map of all the different practitioners, like dynamic facilitation, focusing, NVC, etc., mindfulness is a cloud of practitioners, and that then there's some kind of a cloud that kind of academics, they're needing research to study, that they could have some kind of a gateway to study them.
And that cloud of practitioners, it wouldn't be so much about people, it would be about practices. It would have brief descriptions of the practices, and it would have brief descriptions of the kinds of research that some of the practitioners have said, hey, it would be cool if we could research this, it would be cool if we could so like almost like research requests from those practitioner communities, and that in combination with what this group is going to produce could then be used by grad students, and it could like really help the field take off.
It really sounds like a consulting firm, I have to say.
I didn't get that, Xuan. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. The Wi-Fi is not good. I was saying that it sounds really like a consulting firm, something like empathy consulting.
Yeah. Well, I loved your idea earlier of a consulting firm. I'm very open to that, but I'm talking about the infrastructure. It's like if we created an infrastructure so that people could find each other, and then we also could potentially, come in as consultants and all that. But I think that there's a certain kind of a mapping the practitioner territory and the kinds of needs that practitioners have in terms of what they would like help for creating evidence-based research on. I think that would be a service.
So, Rosa, if I understand, for what I see in this group, we are kind of actually very evenly divided from the two sides, no? Perhaps we actually work both perspectives in this group, like working about the practices and what is there outside, what research has been done, and then because Melissa and Sasha, they are already, working with research and papers, we can actually cross and see what has been done with this map you are proposing and what is needed to be done. So perhaps we could actually provide, a very comprehensive literature of both things. The actual research, the needs, and what is going out there, where they cross. And I would love to, for example, to help with I volunteer to study the practices out there, for example. And perhaps 3 of us can do that, or 2 of us, or, and the other 3 are more specializing in the other line. That doesn't mean that we cannot keep reviewing literature and adding to the common spreadsheet. But we could come from the two sides.
Yeah, there is so kind of the scope of the group that we did want to start with this group, starting with just doing the literature review, kind of gathering that material and slowly see. The idea was to even create like a meta study. I'm not quite sure like what a meta review would look like, what's involved, but so it's we don't want to get too broad in scope, but we can create other groups too. Like the empathy salon is for practitioners to just get to meet and greet. Then we can also have the practitioners. The thing that was growing out of that was that you present your like some kind of a prototype of a lesson that could maybe move into an empathy curriculum. So there's a lot of different. I mean, what I'm looking at is creating an empathy, like a MOOC, an online, massively online course, and then we can come at it from different angles. But there's going to be different, focuses. So I'm a little concerned. I guess I'm concerned about getting too broad of a scope.
Yeah.
It seems that if we can get a narrow focus, first, I mean, we can go in all kinds of directions. I always do that anyway, but. It's just starting with maybe if everybody brings like 5 studies to the database, that we just start putting those together, start getting those organized, and then just be clear not to get too broad in the scope, because otherwise then it gets too disjointed and hard to hold. But to have other projects too, that people can form teams around other related projects towards creating the curriculum.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I'm so happy this conversation is finally taking place. This is much needed, I think, what we do. As I just commented on the side column, I probably have to go now because I have 2 deadlines today. So, but I will also watch the recording, and I look forward to meeting you guys in 2 weeks.
I look forward to it too, and I also have to go tuck in kids. It's 9:30 now, and we're way past story time. But
I have to tuck in myself soon.
Before we go, could we say that everybody, just in terms of to-do, add like 5 papers to the list there? Just bring 5, and then when we get back together, everybody can give a quick overview of the 5 papers or studies that they added to the website. Does that work? Can I get a thumbs up, or is that?
Yeah, that sounds sensible.
Okay. Sounds good. Just a quick question: what's the difference between studies and papers?
The studies I've seen is actual. Looking at having tested something. I've seen others like Jamil Jackie. He actually wrote a paper on, instead of training people on empathy, we should motivate people to want empathy.
Sure.
So he didn't really create a study, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they're the same. You could, these differentiations can be kind of vague, but
yeah. Edward, I have not started doing a lot of research in this area yet, so it would be a lot of work for me to go out and find 5 studies, so I just want to say I'm not necessarily going to commit to that, but if there's some other way I can contribute, I'm happy to do that.
I think just enjoy the ride and see what comes up and learn. I mean, believe me, Rosa, I'm at the beginning too. I'm only 5 months into my PhD, so I'm swimming around lots of things right now, and working full time, and having a family, and running a TEDx event. So,
right.
It's a lot too, and I think that this is a never-ending thing. But just enjoy what's there, to contribute what you can. If you find something fun, throw it on there.
Right. A lot of what I've been collecting so far are more like things on perspectives on what empathy is, rather than stuff specifically on training empathy. So that's But I'll just make a list of what I've found, and I don't know if it will fit in or not. But okay, thank you.
You're gonna run across something, and you're gonna say, this is it.
Yes, you're right.
You know where to post it.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
So to get clear, it's all about academic research, Melissa? Whatever we produce or we read, it has to be academic research, or
well, I think we need to start building this somehow, and I think that right now we're looking for the things that would be considered empirical, something empirical,
okay.
evidence-based.
Okay.
Am I going too far out on a limb to say that we just keep it kind of structured to that now and keep broadening?
I think so.
Come up with something that says this is huge, and they tested 1,000 people, and no, they didn't use this method, but there's something here. Bring it in. I mean, why not? So I don't think it should be totally closed.
And it's the internet. I mean, we have so much space, and Mercedes, if you have some nice personal account stories, then I mean, I'm sure that it's very easy to create a column, personal account stories of. I don't know. Maybe a good preacher, for example, has a nice story of her successful working with the within the church and giving people empathy and. I mean, I think that should not be barred if you have some nice material on that. But if we can put it in a different column, then it makes it easier to actually sort it out afterwards.
Yes.
And this was also, when I made the fill-in format, I took that into consideration. So it looks kind of academic collection-wise, but if you really look through the things, it's only asking for pretty basic information, whether it's a published article or whether it's a website account or a case, that somebody developed as a practitioner. There's room for all of that there. I think it's just, for clarity, to try and fill in all the columns so it is still searchable in some way, that it doesn't get too,
Yes,
want it to be useful.
The other problem is, for example, I am not already into the PhD, so I don't have access like I would have if I was in the PhD to the library where I can pull a bunch of articles, for free.
Completely understand that. I mean, that's absolutely behind the paywall. I get it. So
perhaps I can just send the link, and you, the ones who are actually connected to universities, can pull the article out.
Yeah.
Perfect. No problem.
Okay. Well, then
sounds good, guys.
Great. Then we have next week. In 2 weeks, we meet again. If you can, post some articles to the website. We'll start off maybe just sharing what you posted, and then hopefully send any agenda items, and we can keep building this. Thanks, Melissa, for facilitating.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone.
And everybody for attending.
Rosa, could I quickly ask you, are you a relation to John Zubizarreta in South Carolina?
I don't know. Haven't met him.
Okay.
There's not too many of us in the world,
no,
so I
didn't think
we're all
so.
related in one way or another, but yes.
Okay, just wondered. Okay. Have a wonderful February, everyone, and happy reading.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.